Okay, a screencast on the idea of sociology and the impact it has on social policy and whether or not it should have an impact. There are our learning focus for this week. Okay, so first of all, what we need to do is define what problems there are within society. Obviously, sociology tries to identify problems and make suggestions on how to rectify these things. One of the ways we rectify them is through social policies. But first of all, Worsley believes that social problems are anything that happens like a social behaviour which causes some sort of public or private friction. So this may be things such as poverty, education or delinquents, and the government kind of need to tackle these problems, and this is where the social policy comes into it. Sociological problems aren't necessarily a social problem. What Worsley believes is that they are patterns of relationships that call for explanations. So these could be lots of different things, like, so why are people poor? It's not necessarily trying to rectify it, it's actually just identifying reasons why. So the idea that normal behaviour, what we see as normal inverted commas, is quite interesting and we want to study it. An example that Worsley gives is this of a quiet neighbour. So a family of neighbours who don't really get involved with discussions with neighbours and stuff like that aren't necessarily a social problem. The government aren't interested in trying to tackle the problem that these are creating. However, sociologists are very interested in them because it breaks away from what we think is normal. Okay then, so the sociology does have an impact on social policies, but does research always equal change? Well, there's no guarantee that policymakers will actually listen to the research that's put through, and there's a number of reasons why this might not be the case. So the things that governments and policymakers need to take into consideration is the popularity of the actual research that's being carried out, the electoral popularity of it. So is it going to make them more electable? Does it also actually go with government ideology? So for instance, a bit of research by Marxists or Feminists might not actually go with a conservative government ideology at the moment, so they're going to ignore that. Okay, interest groups have particular ideas, so pressure groups who are trying to put onto minimum wage or equal rights for women will have a particular perspective, and again they may pressure or try to put pressure on the government to put their ideas, their interests into public eye. Globalization has a big impact as well because you know, there's not an influence just of locality, but there's also influence from external policies, so the International Monetary Fund and stuff like that. So they have major impacts. The UN, the EU, we've got this whole debate at the moment whether or not we should actually stay involved within the EU. The idea about the Human Rights Act and possibly getting rid of the Human Rights Act to bring in our own British values or British rights. All these things have major impact on because of globalisation. The cost and the funding behind research also implements not the cost necessarily of actually doing the research, but the cost on the government of carrying out this, the findings of the research. The funding of it, so if this is a government-led sociological research, then if it doesn't really meet their ideologies and what they want, then they're not going to go for it. And finally, there's also critical sociologists. So Marxists are very critical of the state, and this is very unlikely that the government are going to put any Marxist ideologies through. Some sociologists and some government leaders believe that sociology and social policy shouldn't be linked at all. There should be no influence because of reasons such as this, interest groups, because they have their own interests at heart. It's not for the wider society. So looking at it from different perspectives, positivists believe that sociology would actually discover through scientific research ways of improving society and come up with what the problems are, and also offer solutions on how we should actually do it. And this is one of the reasons sociology is around, and that policy users should actually use the findings to implement to improve society. So functionalists believe that policies are actually put in there to try to maintain a value consensus, within society and reduce any conflict that might come about because of inequalities and things like that. They look at it from what is called a piecemeal approach, which is very small and focused and over a time, so they don't rush things. They look at very small specific things and see whether or not any policies need to come out of these changes. So they wouldn't necessarily look at a whole wider scale of social class or feminism. They would look at individual specific things. The views of positivists and functionalists of sociology is very similar, that they should offer an objective, a scientific look at society and offer this information to the state in an objective and scientific way. These differ from other perspectives, and one of which are the social democratic perspective, in that policy should be trying to get rid of any inequality and unfairness that sociologists find within society and the research that they carry out. One of such is the Black Report from 1980. Now, this was one that was commissioned by the Labour government a couple of years earlier, and the Conservative government, led by Margaret Thatcher, allowed this to be printed, basically. But she refused to implement any of the findings. So they looked at the effect of health and class on, the effect of class on your health. And they put forward a load of things, such as free school meals. There should be more benefits for people who are disabled. There should be better social housing. All these things that they believe would actually reduce health issues and also eradicate the strain on the NHS. Now, Margaret Thatcher's government, Conservative government of the 1980s, refused to implement any of these things. So this takes into consideration what we were discussing before about costs and funding, and also government ideologies playing a major role in whether or not any of these sociological researchers and also ideas are implemented at all. Similarly, Marxists obviously believe that the policies should reflect this inequality, but Marxists believe that all social policies serve the interests of capitalism. No policies are put forward that don't serve this interest. They believe that Social Democrats don't go far enough in explaining this, and they don't criticise policymakers enough because of their neglect to implement their suggestions. Research is ignored by the state, according to those, and as a result of this, the main role of sociologists, according to Marxism, is to highlight these inequalities and to criticise them and reveal this exploitation. They believe that all of the policies legitimise the ideology of capitalism, so they make us think, actually, well, this is the way it should be. They maintain the labour force as well. Even you could say minimum wage maintains the labour force. Yes, on one hand we've got this idea where we're getting paid what we should be getting paid, but the only reason they do this, is, according to Marxists, is because they realise they need the labour force. And it prevents revolution through threats, policies, laws, things like that, prevent this overthrowing of capitalist society. The other conflict view from the feminist perspective is that all social policies are put in place because we live in a patriarchal society, and they benefit men and they oppress women, and policies focus on what is seen as a normal family, this idea of a nuclear family. They neglect the idea of cohabitation or single parent families. They're not there to promote these types of families. They're not there to help these types of families. There's a major impact by feminist research, however, and that liberal reforms have come about, such as education. So we have more equality and diversity within teacher training, understanding about sexism and things like that. We have more female teachers. We have better literature, books, publications, all show women in a positive, strong light. They don't show this stereotypical idea about men going into certain jobs and women going into certain jobs. This has all come about because of liberal reforms brought on by liberal feminists. The Divorce Reform Act and things like that are other examples of policies which have been influenced by feminists. From a radical viewpoint, setting up of funded refuges for women from homes of domestic violence and things like that, and allowing this separatism to happen, which is what radical feminists call for, and this has all come about, feminists believe, because of the radical reforms, because of feminist movements. And the last thing we're going to look at is go back to this new right ideology. Now, the new right ideology is that social policies shouldn't be there to make up for a lack of individual responsibility. They believe any sort of policy should be very minimal, and it should just be there to allow individuals and restore individuals' ability to look after themselves and their family. Charles Murray talks about this idea of perverse incentives, that people are kind of rewarded for not doing anything or not looking after themselves through the welfare state. He believes it weakens families' self-reliance and self-resolve, and people are just too willing to give up, or what's the point in trying, I can get the money off the government for this. And this has led to a breakdown in wider society. A conservative-led research think tank called Breakdown Britain came up with these ideas to try and restore individual responsibilities, such as marriage preparation and parenting classes. Now, these are very much things that are what some would say old-fashioned. Feminists would certainly say marriage preparation classes are ridiculous, and parenting classes. These are things that the new right have put forward to try to maintain a nuclear family where the woman stays at home, and this is where the minimal influence on the family comes from. Policy should be put in place to try to maintain this very much nuclear family and biological roles of the family. Okay, that is it for now. I'll see you all later on. Bye bye.